She cried every single time he tried to leave. Not because she was sad. Because it worked. That's not love. That's a technique. And someone in your life might be using it on you right now and calling it love too. Here's the thing nobody tells you about psychological manipulation. It doesn't feel like manipulation when it's happening. It feels like love. Or guilt. Or shame. Or the certainty that you are the problem. And the people who are best at it, they don't even think of themselves as manipulators. They think they're just getting what they need. Psychologists estimate that 1 in 25 people show strongly manipulative personality traits. That's not rare. That's your office. Your family. Possibly your relationship right now. Today I'm going to show you every technique they use, what it looks like, why your brain falls for it, and how you stop it. By the time this is over, you will never look at certain relationships the same way again. This is a video about dark psychology and the specific tactics manipulators use, not so you can use them, but so you can recognize them and name them, because naming something is the first step to taking its power away. Let's get into it. Techniques. 1. Intermittent reinforcement. I want to start with the technique that explains why intelligent, self-aware people stay in terrible relationships for years. It's called intermittent reinforcement, and it's the closest thing to a psychological trap that actually exists. Here's the mechanism. B.F. Skinner, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, discovered something uncomfortable while studying pigeons in the 1950s. When he gave them food on a predictable schedule, they pressed a lever calmly and moved on. When he gave them food randomly, same amount, no pattern, they became obsessed. Pressing the lever constantly. Unable to stop. Because the unpredictability was more compelling than the reward itself. That's the slot machine. That's every casino on earth. And it's also the architecture of a specific kind of toxic relationship. When someone alternates between warm and cold, loving 1 week, distant and critical the next, without pattern, without reason you can identify, your brain does what the pigeon did. It becomes fixated on solving the unpredictability. On winning. Not because the relationship is good. Because the reward is inconsistent. A woman I'll call Sarah, a successful attorney, nobody's definition of naive, spent 6 years with a man who told her she was extraordinary approximately every 3rd week. The other 2 weeks, he barely acknowledged she was in the room. She described it later as chasing a feeling I'd already had. She wasn't weak. She was addicted. There's a difference. The cruelest part? The manipulator often doesn't consciously engineer this. Sometimes the behavior is simply who they are, which makes it no less destructive, and actually makes it harder to leave, because you can't point to the plan. How to recognize it? You feel relief when things are good, not joy. Relief means the bad part is over. Joy means you're actually happy. Notice which one you're actually feeling. How to interrupt it? Write down the pattern. Literally. Dates. What happened? Over 6 weeks, the inconsistency becomes undeniable on paper in a way it never is inside the relationship. 2. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is the most precise tool in the manipulation toolkit because it doesn't attack what you do. It attacks your ability to know. The name comes from a 1944 film where a husband secretly dims the gas-powered lights in the house, then tells his wife she's imagining the change. She starts to believe she's losing her mind. That's the model. In practice, it sounds like, "That never happened. You're too sensitive. Everyone else agrees with me, it's not just me. I'm worried about you. You've been so confused lately. But here's the psychological detail that makes gaslighting specifically devastating. It exploits a vulnerability we all have, the secret fear that maybe I'm the problem. That maybe my perception is unreliable. That maybe I do overreact. A skilled gaslight finds that fear and presses on it, consistently, until you can't trust your own memory. There's a documented case of a man who, over 3 years, convinced his wife she had a serious memory disorder. He moved objects in their house and denied it. He cancelled plans she'd made and told her she never made them. By the time she left, she'd seen 2 neurologists. There was nothing wrong with her brain. There was something very wrong with him. The counter: keep a record. Not because you're building a legal case, but because your memory, in writing, with a timestamp, is harder to rewrite than the verbal version. Gaslighting lives in the space between your memory and theirs. The written record closes that space. And find one person outside the relationship you trust explicitly. Not to vent, specifically to reality check. Did I overreact here? Does this seem normal to you? That external reference point is sometimes the only thing that cuts through. 3. The fog: fear, obligation, and guilt. There's a concept in psychology called the fog, and therapists use this term specifically when describing how controlling people hold others in place without ever raising their voice or making an explicit demand. Fog stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. And skilled manipulators cycle through all 3, sometimes in a single conversation. Fear: I don't know what I'd do without you. The implication of consequences hovers without ever being stated directly. Obligation: after everything I've sacrificed for you. The relationship is reframed as a debt you owe rather than a choice you're making. Guilt: I guess my feelings just don't matter to you. You're made responsible for their emotional state regardless of what you actually did. Here's why this is so effective: none of these look like manipulation on the surface. They look like emotion. They look like vulnerability. And we're wired to respond to vulnerability, to fix it, soothe it, address it. That's the exploit. The single most useful question you can ask yourself when the fog rolls in: is this person expressing a feeling or applying pressure? Feelings invite dialogue. Pressure demands compliance. The difference, once you can sense it, is unmistakable. Expressing a feeling leaves room for you. Applying pressure doesn't. 4. Love bombing. This one feels incredible when it's happening. That's the whole point. Love bombing is when someone floods you with affection, attention, compliments, and intensity, usually very early in a relationship. They call constantly. They say you're unlike anyone they've ever met. They make you feel like you've been seen in a way no one else has managed. It feels like connection. What it actually is a setup. They're manufacturing an emotional bond at an accelerated rate so that when they inevitably pull back, you feel the loss of something you never actually had. And you'll work hard to get it back. Cults use this. Abusive partners use this. High-pressure salespeople use this. The technique is identical across all 3 contexts. That should tell you something. The tell: real love develops. It doesn't arrive fully formed at maximum intensity in week 1. If someone seems to be auditioning for the role of your soulmate before they actually know you, that's not depth. That's a strategy. Slow down and watch what happens when you do. 5. Isolation. Isolation is the technique that makes every other technique on this list easier to execute. It starts almost invisibly. Your friends are kind of negative, have you noticed? Then, I just worry about their influence on you. Then, you always seem worse after you spend time with them. One day you look up and the people who used to know you best, the ones who would have said something, who would have noticed, aren't really there anymore. That wasn't drift. That was architecture. Here's the framing I want you to hold on to. The people in your life who know you well, your close friends, your family, they function as mirrors. They reflect an accurate image of you back to yourself. Your history. Your character. Who you actually are. When a manipulator isolates you, they're not just cutting off your support system. They're removing every mirror in the room. And once all the mirrors are gone, the only reflection you have access to is theirs. They decide what you look like. They decide who you are. That's not a side effect of isolation. That's the goal of isolation. This is why isolation appears first in nearly every clinical checklist for identifying an abusive relationship. It's not just a red flag. It's the foundation everything else gets built on. The rule: anyone who consistently works to make your world smaller is not protecting you. They're positioning themselves as your only option. 6. Silent treatment and stonewalling. The silent treatment sounds like something teenagers do. In the hands of an adult who understands what they're doing, it's a precision instrument. The silence isn't moodiness. It's withdrawal of emotional presence as punishment, and for most people, the absence of warmth and connection is genuinely unbearable. So they apologize. They over-explain. They rearrange themselves just to restore the peace. Which is the only thing the silence was ever designed to produce. Here's the piece that elevates this from petty to serious. Psychologist John Gottman, after studying thousands of couples over decades, identified stonewalling, complete emotional shutdown during conflict, as one of the 4 behaviors most predictive of relationship failure. He called the 4 of them the 4 horsemen. Stonewalling made the list not just because it's a control tactic, but because it makes repair impossible. There's no accountability. There's no resolution. There's only compliance or more silence. What to do: state once, clearly, what you'd like to discuss and when you're available. Then step back. Chasing silence confirms it works. Don't confirm it. 7. Triangulation. Triangulation is when a manipulator introduces a third-party real or invented to make you feel insecure, competitive, or outnumbered. My ex never had a problem with this. Everyone I've talked to thinks I'm right. Sarah at work said she thinks you're overreacting too. The third party may not have said any of this. It doesn't matter. The goal isn't accuracy, it's to make you feel like you're arguing against a consensus rather than just one person. To make you feel replaceable. To make you focused on keeping them rather than evaluating whether you even want them. The more sophisticated version involves actual people flirting in front of you, constantly referencing how desirable they are to others, manufacturing competition. What all of it creates is a specific, hard-to-name anxiety. This low-level feeling that you're always almost losing something. That feeling is the point. The reset: the next time you feel that anxiety, stop and ask when you last felt genuinely secure with this person. Not reassured. Not relieved. Actually secure. If you're struggling to remember, that's information. 8. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is manipulation's most domestic form. It lives in kitchens and living rooms. It sounds like family. After everything I've done for you, I guess I'm just not a priority. Fine. Don't worry about me. The key distinction between someone expressing genuine hurt and someone guilt-tripping you is function. Real hurt expresses itself and invites response. Guilt tripping deploys hurt as a lever specifically when you're about to do something the other person doesn't want. They don't say, "I feel lonely and I'd love more time with you." They say, "I guess I'll just be here alone." It's fine. The ask is hidden. The guilt is naked. And you're supposed to intuit the transaction and complete it. The move, ask for the direct ask. It sounds like something's bothering you. What do you need? You're not dismissing their feeling. You're refusing to respond to implication instead of communication. Healthy people can make the ask direct. Manipulators often can't because the guilt mechanism only works when the ask stays hidden. 9. Projection. Projection is the technique that keeps manipulators from ever having to look at themselves. It's when someone accuses you of the exact thing they are doing. The person who is lying calls you dishonest. The one controlling everything says you're too controlling. The cheater is constantly certain their partner is cheating. Psychologically, it's a defense mechanism. Attributing your own unacceptable impulses to someone else relieves internal pressure without requiring self-examination. But in a relationship context, it serves a second function: it keeps you permanently on defense. You spend your energy disproving accusations while the spotlight never moves. A man spent the better part of a year convinced his partner was pulling away from the relationship, distant, uncommitted, never fully present. He brought it up constantly. His partner was baffled. 6 months later, he left. For someone he'd been seeing for 4 of those months. His certainty about her detachment had been, the whole time, a description of his own. The tell, when someone's critique of you sounds like a very specific and accurate self-portrait, that's not a coincidence. That's a window. 10. Moving the goalposts. This might be the most quietly draining technique on the list. You meet the standard. The standard moves. You accomplish something. There's no acknowledgement, just a new expectation. You can never win. The finish line is always retreating. The purpose isn't to motivate you. It's to keep you in a permanent state of proving yourself. Which means your sense of worth stays entirely dependent on their assessment, and they control the scoreboard. They decide if and when you've earned approval. Psychologists who study conditional parenting love that's tied to achievement or behavior rather than simply to who the child is have found that adults who grew up with moving goalposts often internalize the pattern as normal. They seek out environments that replicate it. They interpret a clear, consistent standard as boring or too easy. The chronic striving feels like self-improvement. It's not. It's a wound that got mistaken for a personality trait. A man spends 15 years building the career his father said would finally make him proud. He gets there. His father says, "That's good, but have you thought about where you want to be in 10 more years?" No pause. No acknowledgement. Just the next target. He's 43 years old and still chasing the same approval he was chasing at 12. The question, is this person's standard movable in both directions, or does it only ever move one way? One moved goalpost is a miscommunication. A consistent pattern is a trap. And here's the uncomfortable part: manipulators rarely use just one of these techniques. They stack them. What you're about to see in the next 5, they're designed to work together. 11. Foot in the door. This technique is in more places than you realize: sales, advertising, politics, and everyday relationships. The principle: get a small yes first. Then a slightly bigger one. Because once we've agreed to something, we feel internal pressure to stay consistent with that identity. We've already defined ourselves as someone who says yes to this person, this cause, this idea. Robert Cialdini, who literally wrote the textbook on influence, documented this extensively. People who agreed to put a small safe driving sign in their window were dramatically more likely, weeks later, to agree to a large, intrusive billboard in their yard. Because they'd already defined themselves as people who care about safe driving. The first yes shaped the second. In relationships, it sounds like this. At first it's small. Can you cancel your plans tonight? I really need you. Sure. Of course. Then, do you really need to see them every week? Then, I just feel like your friends pull you away from us. 6 months later, you don't see them at all. Each step seemed reasonable. The destination would have been unacceptable at the start. That's the technique. The habit: evaluate each request on its own terms independently of what you've already agreed to. Your previous yes doesn't obligate the next one. 12. Victimhood as a weapon. This is the most delicate technique to name because we should always extend compassion to people who are genuinely hurting. But a manipulator who plays the victim uses their pain as infrastructure. Every time you try to express a need, the conversation collapses into their suffering. Every conflict ends with you comforting them even when they started it. The moment you set a boundary, they're the one who's been wronged. The pattern is consistent and directional. It always flows toward their needs and away from yours. You can never address your own feelings without first getting through the wall of their victimhood. The litmus test: raise something small that's bothering you. Watch what happens. Does the conversation make room for both of you, or does it immediately, reliably, fold back into them? The answer to that question, asked honestly, is almost always the answer to a much larger one. 13. Negging. Negging started as a term in the pickup artist world, but the technique shows up everywhere. It's a backhanded compliment. Something that sounds positive while carrying an embedded put-down. You're so confident, I wish I didn't care about looking good like you do. You're actually really smart for someone without a degree. I'm impressed, I didn't think you could pull that off. The goal is to create a small crack in your self-assurance. Just enough uncertainty that you start seeking their approval to repair it. And here's the part that makes it stick. Studies show people are measurably less likely to call out a compliment than a direct insult, even when the compliment made them feel worse. We're not socially equipped to say that comment disguised as a compliment actually upset me. The response: you don't need to call it out. You just need to notice it and not chase the approval the comment was engineered to make you want. Name it internally and let it go. 14. Anchoring and framing. These two techniques are most common in boardrooms and ballot booths, but they work everywhere, and they work on everyone. Anchoring: whoever sets the first number in a negotiation has already won half the argument. A car salesman shows you the $65,000 model first. Now the $42,000 car feels like a deal even if it's $20,000 more than you planned to spend. The anchor restructured your entire frame of reference before you made a single conscious decision. Framing: in a famous study, patients were significantly more likely to choose surgery when told it had a 90% survival rate than when told it had a 10% mortality rate. Same surgery. Same statistics. Different frame. Wildly different decisions. These techniques are in every political speech, every pitch meeting, and every argument that starts with the real issue here is, which instantly repositions the whole conversation around the speaker's preferred ground. The habit: before responding to any strong proposal, ask what information isn't being presented. Ask what the starting reference point was, and who chose it. The anchor and the frame are almost never accidental. 15. Flattery and vanity targeting. Last one, and it targets people who think they're immune. A skilled manipulator does their homework. They identify both your insecurities and your ego, and they know how to address both precisely. The flattery is specific, not generic. Not "you're great, but I've never met someone who understands this the way you do." Specific flattery feels like being seen, which is different from being complimented. It lowers your guard in a way generalized praise never could. And then the ask follows. Here's what makes this technique almost unfair. Research shows people are significantly more likely to comply with a request after a genuine feeling compliment, even when they consciously know the compliment came from someone who wants something. The awareness doesn't cancel the effect. The brain and the heart aren't running the same software. The defense: decouple the way someone made you feel from the thing they're asking for. Evaluate the request on its own merits, in a separate moment if possible, before the warmth of the flattery has fully faded. How to actually protect yourself. 15 techniques. And I want to give you protection that matches that, not a list of affirmations. First, build a reality anchor. One person outside the situation who you deliberately check in with. Not to vent, specifically to reality check. Does this seem normal to you? Manipulation, especially gaslighting, is most effective in isolation. This person is your reference point when your own perception is being actively destabilized. Second, track patterns, not incidents. One uncomfortable moment is a moment. 5 moments with the same shape is a system. Your brain is built to explain away individual incidents, to give the benefit of the doubt, to assume context. It's much harder to rationalize a documented pattern. Start writing things down. Not obsessively. Just enough to see the shape. Third, set a small boundary and watch what happens. You don't need to analyze their behavior in the abstract. Just try one clear, low-stakes no and observe the response. A secure person accepts it or has an honest conversation. A manipulator escalates, guilt trips, goes silent, or manufactures a crisis. The reaction to your boundary is diagnostic in a way that nothing else is. Fourth, treat urgency as a signal to slow down, not speed up. Manipulative pressure almost always includes artificial time constraints. I need to know now. Why do you have to think about everything? Other people would just do this. Urgency is the enemy of clear judgment, and it is frequently manufactured. The more pressured you feel to decide immediately, the more important it is to wait. Fifth, use the vocabulary you just learned. Vague discomfort is hard to act on. Something feels off is easy to dismiss. But what I'm experiencing right now has the structure of intermittent reinforcement that's actionable. The terms aren't academic. They're precision tools. The moment you can name what's happening, it begins to lose its grip. I want to say something before you go, and I need you to actually hear it. If you watched this entire video and recognized someone or multiple techniques in a relationship you're currently in, that recognition is not nothing. That's your mind putting language to something it has been trying to tell you for a long time. You didn't fall for manipulation because you're weak. You fell for it because you're human, and because these techniques are specifically designed to work on people who feel deeply, who value loyalty, who actually show up for the people they love. Your empathy was used against you. That's not a character flaw. That's a crime of opportunity on their part. But here's what's different now: you have the map. You know the patterns. You know the names. You know what to watch for. And the moment you can name what's happening to you, the spell starts to break. Not all at once. But it starts. And starting is everything. You deserve relationships where you never have to question your own sanity. Where love isn't something you earn back. Where a no is just a no and not an opening move in a negotiation. That's not too much to ask. That's just what healthy looks like. You know the difference now. That matters. If something in this video hit closer than you expected, drop a comment. Tell me which technique landed. I read everyone, and honestly, those conversations shape what comes next. If this was useful, share it. You probably already know someone who needs this vocabulary. Like if you want more like this. Subscribe if you want to stick around. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.